We all have to try stuff sometimes, just throw everything at the walls and see what sticks. I've made videos this way. You might have approached that guy or girl you like with a random opener to see if it worked, and Game Freak really tried to make the Elemental Monkeys a thing. But just like my videos may occasionally completely flop, and you might have been shot down by the person you had your eye on, Game Freak 2 suffered the cold, hard hand of defeat. The Elemental Monkeys aren't popular. In fact, they're some of the most disliked Pokémon around. This is the story of when Game Freak really thought they did something, but instead only created a trio of Pokémon here to test the theory whether every Pokémon truly is someone's favorite. Let's start at the beginning, with the plan, the idea behind these three. They're inspired by the motif of the three wise monkeys: see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. That's why Simisear has big ears, he's hear no evil, Simipour has its eyes closed so it doesn't see evil, and Simisage gives you a thumbs up because he's a positive little guy who won't speak no evil. Do want to point out this mythical trio also has an often forgotten fourth member, Do No Evil, who covers his genitals, so it's probably best that didn't make the cut. From a gameplay perspective though, it is more than obvious that the monkeys are meant to parallel our familiar starting trio. They're the same types, duh. They have the same super exclusive hidden abilities, Overgrow, Torrent and Blaze. They can learn the pledge moves, which are also usually reserved for starters, and they even have the same gender ratio. In an interview with Nintendo Dream, translated by Dr. Lava, their creator Takao Uno explained that he indeed used several techniques Game Freak likes using for starters on these three monkeys, particularly the way their personality shines through. Pansage is meant to be a punk, Panpour more gentle, and Pansear carefree, which is definitely similar to what we've seen with recent starter trios, who always seem very anthropomorphically coded. I think it is likely that the idea behind this was as simple as, do people like starters? Well, they're usually among the most popular Pokémon in any generation, so yeah. Well then, how about another set for you? Now we have 6 Pokémon guaranteed to be popular. To set the monkeys up even better, a lot of Black and White's early game revolves around them. It always reminded me of a typical episode of the anime, where you have 20 minutes of Pokémon time often revolving entirely around one species of Pokémon who then never really appears again. Well, that kinda happened here. First, you receive an Elemental Monkey in the Dream Yard from the girl at the entrance. She will always give you the monkey your starter is strong against, so while you are forced to obtain one, you cannot choose it yourself. The reason for this is so it is instantly an important part of your team, as the nearby gym of Strident City will have you face off against the brother whose monkey is strong against your starter, meaning your new monkey is super effective against his. Do you get what I mean by that anime episode feeling? The entire Strident City arc revolves around the Elemental Monkeys, with one being the gym leader's ace and the other an ally you will inevitably obtain and have to make the conscious decision not to use, despite it actually being a great help. Something like this has only very rarely happened in the Pokémon series, especially when you consider this is more than just a wild encounter against an overworld Pokémon, like Sudowoodo for example. It makes clear that Game Freak had plans for these monkeys, with especially Pansage getting a big marketing push thanks to the actual anime, where it was the main partner of Ash's new travel body Silent. In fact, Pansage actually leaked before Black and White were released, as toys of it and Axew surfaced before the games were even out. That's the level of hype and merchandise potential Game Freak saw with these monkeys. Which begs the question, how did it all go wrong? Well, as is often the case with questions like that, I don't think there is a definitive, factual, objective answer. Multiple factors come into play, all contributing to what ended up being one of the biggest failed experiments of the Pokémon series. The first is a very basic, simple, but super important reason. Most people, they just don't like the design of these. While I think the basic monkeys, the Pants if you will, are decently cute enough and not the victim of too much vitriol, it's especially the evolved forms, the Simis, that fall flat. I've seen the terms ugly, bootleg Pokémon, hideous, a face no one could love, all thrown around repeatedly, mostly directed at Simipour and Simisear. Simisage doesn't seem to get as much hate, but it has never seen any popularity either, mostly as a result of the other two clinging to it like a millstone when you're trying to swim to the surface. But this is all subjective. Well, a ton of subjective opinions can still make something a borderline objective fact, but we'll get to that later. For now, this part of the equation is just taste. There are also more underlying problems that are actual issues and poorly done on Game Freak's part. First of all, they should have given us a choice. I don't remember much of my first playthrough of Black and White unfortunately, but I do remember this. I had picked Oshawott and as such received a Pansear, which I didn't like. I thought it looked like a monkey with a turd on its head. But when I fought Silent and saw his Pansage, I thought it was pretty cute. Why didn't I get that? I had Oshawott, I had room for a grass type on my team, why was I forced to use the fire one? Well, the answer is to teach me how the type effectiveness chart works. You know, the one that had been the same since Gen 1, like 15 years ago. Had X and Y did something like this to teach you the pros and cons of the fairy type, fair enough. But Gen 5 really was in no position to force this level of type effectiveness check on you. The modern games still do something similar, with rivals remarking if you use a super effective move during your first battle, but that's so much less offensive than this. I think many people didn't realize this was going on at the time, so it didn't directly influence their views on the monkeys, but unconsciously it did play a role. People complain about hand-holding in Pokémon so much nowadays, to the point I find the complaints more annoying than the actual tutorials. People really hate this. So is it then really such a surprise that people dislike the Pokémon that might just be created solely to teach you what Gen 1 just put in the manual? I would say no. But this of course wasn't the monkeys' only purpose. They were also knockoff starters, and boy did Game Freak mess this up especially. The entire point of a starter Pokémon is that it's strong, unique and a partner for life. The Elemental Monkeys are weak, outclassed by the mid-game, not unique as they can be found in the wild, and evolve using elemental stones. Which means that not only do you just have to happen to find that out one way or another, their evolved forms also learn 0 new moves, as stone evolutions always do. And remember, this is from before easy access to move tutors, move relearners and bags filled with easy to get TMs. And when playing Black and White now, probably on a 3DS or a less legal way, you can just easily look up where to find a leaf stone, what level Pansage, learn seed bomb, blah 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 blah. But that wasn't that easy when Black and White were first released. This information wasn't all available on launch day. The internet wasn't what it is today, and so many people's first impressions were formed blind like a Simipour. And that meant you either couldn't find an evolution stone, didn't even know you needed one, or probably used it too early and got stuck with a Simi without significant moves. And so, the results were not kind to the monkeys. It took a while, I think, for Game Freak to realize that though, as the Elemental Monkeys appeared quite prominently in Gen 5's first TCG set, the anime, Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Gates to Infinity, and are still found very early on in Pokémon X and Y. But something changed after that. Well, it is very hard for us on the outside to know exactly how Game Freak, or probably more accurately the Pokémon Company, monitors Pokémon popularity. We got a rare look behind the curtain in 2016, at the tail end of Gen 6. This was the release year of Pokémon the movie, Volcanion and the Mechanical Marvel, and to celebrate this joyous occasion, the Pokémon Company Japan held a poll among fans where they were asked to pick their favorite Pokémon, with the winner being chosen to be distributed at showings of the movie. Once upon a time, Takao Uno had surely hoped his monkeys would rise to the top, but the opposite was true. In fact, Simisear infamously ended with a total of 0 votes. Not a single person wanted it. Not a single person considered Simisear their favorite Pokémon. In a sign of good sportsmanship, Game Freak actually released Simisear as an event Pokémon at Pokécenters and stores as a reaction to this, but as cheeky as that may have been, it does seem like this poll changed the position of the monkeys drastically. Since this poll, the trio have only appeared in the TCG thrice, which isn't awful, but when you consider that each received double that number in the years prior, it definitely stands out. They have also barely featured in the anime since Ash traded in Silent for Clement, but by far the most telling are the mainline games. Since that disastrous poll, Pansage, Panpour and Pansear have not been available in any of the Pokémon games that followed. You have to trade them in ORAS, Pokémon bank them in Alola, and not a single game currently on the market for Nintendo Switch allows you to bring over Gen 5's first gift Pokémon. Now, I did very carefully construct that sentence in such a way I can still mention that Pokémon Legends ZA is changing that, making the Elemental Monkeys available again since, well, the last time we visited Kalos. It's that bad. While the entirety of Gen 5 has more or less been redeemed after originally being hailed as the worst Pokémon games ever, with the worst Pokémon designs of all time, the same hasn't really happened with the monkeys. They're not Maractus, who became the poster child of forgotten Pokémon when Dexit was announced. They're still disliked, still unpopular, and that will most likely never change. Had they not bombed so hard, this would have been a prime time for them to get Megas, for example, but they won't. I don't need the game in my Switch to know that. The Elemental Monkeys are Pokemon's least popular creatures. That remains hard to believe when you consider that they were once planned to be massive hits. What are your thoughts on the Elemental Monkeys? Agree with the general consensus, or do you actually kinda root for these underdogs or undermonkeys? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.